Like many history enthusiasts, I have a deep fondness for the Romans and the story of their people. From humble beginnings along the Tiber River, this small city-state would come to dominate the Mediterranean world for centuries, leaving a lasting legacy that is still felt to this day. The story of Rome is one full of impressive men and women, people who serve as benchmarks for the great, good, and terrible that humans are capable of. And one such remarkable figure was Diocletian, a man who stands side by side with the likes of Augustus and Trajan as one of the truly great emperors. And while the story of Diocletian's time in power is truly remarkable, how he chose to end his reign is even more incredible, a story certainly worth repeating. As a boy, Diocletian grew up in an era known as the crisis of the 3rd century. This was a time when being emperor was more akin to a death sentence rather than a prestigious position of luxury and ease. During this period, the Roman Empire witnessed no less than 20 men seize the title of emperor, often through extremely violent means. Gone was the golden era of the Pax Romana, presided over by the likes of Marcus Aurelius. To the men of Diocletian's generation, it seemed the Roman Empire was in a grand death throe, but this was not to be. Like many men of this era, Diocletian achieved his rise to the heights of political power through service in the Roman army. Displaying natural leadership abilities and a sturdy mind, Diocletian progressively ascended through the imperial ranks, eventually becoming an inner circle member of the then reigning Emperor Carus. In 283 AD, Emperor Carus suddenly died while on campaign in Sassanid Persia, resulting in his son Numerian taking the imperial throne. And after ascending to the throne, Numerian would, like his father, suddenly die less than a year later from unknown circumstances in Asia Minor. In theory, the throne should have then passed to Numerian's brother Carinus, who at the time governed the western portion of the Roman Empire. However, this was not to be. Diocletian would utilize his political acumen and personal connections to see himself declared the new Roman Emperor of the East. While the details of how exactly Diocletian pulled this political maneuver off are scant, he was evidently an extremely well-connected man in the Roman army and, by extension, the imperial governing apparatus. Remember how I said the Romans were living through a period called the crisis of the 3rd century? Well, Diocletian's reign is what brought that crisis to an end. In 284 AD, the soldiers and officers formerly loyal to Numerian would unanimously acclaim Diocletian emperor in the wake of Numerian's death. Following his ascent, Diocletian knew the Western Emperor Carinus wouldn't accept his power grab peacefully. To make a long story short, Diocletian would have the good fortune of a relatively quick civil war, defeating Carinus at the Battle of Margus less than a year after his ascent to the purple, securing his sole rule of the Roman Empire. From this point onwards, Diocletian would reform practically every aspect of the Roman social, political, economic, military, and administrative structure, an act matched in breadth and scope only by Augustus, the first Roman emperor. And he could achieve these feats thanks to his relatively long time in power, 21 years, a stark contrast to the almost yearly turnover of emperors during the previous 2 generations. But Diocletian's many accomplishments during his reign isn't what inspired me to create this video. Rather, the inspiration came from how he chose to end his reign. In 305 AD, Diocletian would, by his own volition, abdicate from the position of Emperor of the Romans and retire to his palace located in modern-day Split, Croatia. I really want to stress how profound this act was. Roman emperors just did not give up power willingly. It was unheard of. Once you took on the title of emperor, you were expected to hold that title until death. To put this act into perspective, the last Roman who willingly gave up absolute power after seizing it was the dictator Sulla in 79 BC. Nearly 400 years prior and at a time when the precedents of the Roman Republic obliged willful abdication of absolute power. Unless you were interested in being murdered by your fellow countrymen from fear of tyranny, something that a certain Julius Caesar would find out the hard way. By Diocletian's time, The memories and expectations of the Roman Republic were long gone. He was not bound by the same social expectations that obliged Sulla to give up absolute power, which makes his abdication all the more remarkable. Now settled comfortably at his retirement palace along the Dalmatian coast, Diocletian took up, amongst many other pleasurable activities, the pursuit of farming, tending to his many crops, including cabbages. Unfortunately for the Romans, with Diocletian no longer on the political scene, trouble began to stir once again. A few years into his retirement, a delegation of former colleagues and friends would beg Diocletian to return to the political arena and set the Romans straight once more. In a now legendary response, Diocletian would reportedly say something to the effect of, quote, "If you could see at Salona the cabbages raised by our hands, you surely would never judge that a temptation." History is chock full of megalomaniacs who pursue power to their own ends, often at the expense of everyone around them. That is why I've always found Diocletian's life so fascinating. How many people can willingly give up absolute power and go into a peaceful retirement, and when called upon again a few years later to seize that power once more, simply refuse? The answer, I imagine, is not many.